Fab, thank you. Morning, everyone. So, myself, David Cole, Managing Director, and Mark Meaner, Account Director. So, our company is an online research company, and what we do is we help marketeers to make decisions by surveying people. That's in a nutshell. And we work across all sorts of areas. So, I used to be, many moons ago, the head of database marketing at Telegraph. Launched the first UK newspaper reader panel. We do a lot of work with the trade press, doing tracking studies, which they then publish. Mark used to be at Bernardo's, has a lot of experience in the charity sector particularly, and we do a lot of conference speaking and all the rest of it. So that's a little overview. And straight after here, actually, we're going to Vodafone to help them with a big project around data and consent, and I'll talk about that in a sec. So, quantitative research marketing, a quantitative online market research agency. There's basically two types of research, quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is volume, qualitative is not the volume, it's the in-depth. So we're the quantitative, so we'll interview hundreds if not thousands of people via a survey and then extrapolate those results to a broader population. So sort of companies that we work with, football clubs, media companies, charities, etc., etc. Right, so the first thing I want to talk about is, it's actually a study we ran for 10 years. We don't run it anymore. It's called the marketing gap. And frankly, the only point about research is if you can find out something you didn't know before. If you're simply reinforcing things you already know, it's of limited value. So research needs to be about insight. And the great thing about research, or the reason why we use it, is because we are often not the target market. We're different to the people that we're marketing to. And the problem is that the more senior you get, the more influence you have, and often the more different you are from the people you're trying to persuade to buy from you. So you might be the chief exec of a big car company or a big charity, whatever it is, and you're far removed from the average person you're trying to persuade to consume from you. That's why you need research. So of course you need to use your experience, but you need to use objective insight to wrap around that experience. So why do marketeers get it wrong? Well, often skilled in marketing techniques, so hopefully when you come out of this place, you'll understand all about marketing. You'll understand the brand as you start to work for a company, but you'll be different from the people you're marketing to. And the other thing is, if you get it right to this month, it might be completely different next month or next year. So you repeat an exercise, and lo and behold, you get a different result, and you can't understand why, because the marketing communication was identical, but it just bombed. Maybe it's because of the new competitor, maybe because prices have gone up. It could be all sorts of reasons, but there's a need to stay in touch, basically. So marketers, no matter how skilled they are, get it wrong. It's complicated. Things are always changing. So this is a little chart to try and re-emphasize that. So we've got consumers, we've got marketeers, and one of the challenges is there's not enough feedback from consumers. There's often transactional feedback, which is when someone buys something, but often that's too late. You might have spent a lot of money promoting a campaign or creating products, etc., etc. And if you just have to wait till people buy, that's a bit late. The investment is huge to get to that point. Changing environment, often people are pushing things which don't really work. I mean, I'm not saying that social media doesn't work, it clearly does work, but it has its role. And it's not all about creating sales through social media. And often people are pushing particular techniques because it just works for them and they want to create a bit of a noise. So you have to be very sensitive about what is realistic and what isn't realistic with all that stuff that's said out there. Our own marketing, lifestyle is completely different, and career-driven agendas. Right, so this is just a quick example of the sort of complexity, if you like, the amount of decisions that a marketeer might have to make if they're sending an email out. Yeah. So this email is an important charity appeal, and the first decision you need to make when you're sending it out is who you're going to send it to. So is it going to go to the old people, the young people, the rich, the poor, males, females, and which combination? So you've got a database, and so you decide, right, you're going to send it to that. Then you've got the subject line, which is really important, because if you don't get the right subject line, people won't open it. And so you decide which subject line. There's a variety of different ones, and maybe that's 4 of those. And of course, these are all interconnected, so there's 20 options there. And then you think about, well, there's an incentive, very key thing to drive response. So maybe there's 4 choices there, there's 80 there. And a testimonial, someone who really believes in the cause, perhaps a celebrity or something. There's maybe 3 choices there. An image, that all has impact. And what we call an ask in the charity world, which is basically what you're asking for specifically. So it could be how much, what the product is, etc. And finally, a PS, that's a direct marketing term, is the last bit of copy which people tend to jump to if they're a little bit bored from a text. So you look at that, there's 11,500 possible combinations that you could go out with. What hope has anyone got of getting that right? Yeah. So this is why we need research, because research can look at these individual things and start to think, well, actually, the best audience to go is that. We did a bit of research on a subject line, and without sending the mailing out, and this seems to be the best. So you can start to drill down the possibility of failing, if you like, and remove a lot of the issues. And you can make your decision easier. And anyone who says that they're going to get it right first time because they understand the brand is just wrong. They're just wrong. And often the more senior people tend to say that. So research is really important. So this is just an example of how we ran some research in a direct mail campaign. It's quite an old example, this, but it illustrates the example beautifully. So there was a mailing pack the client was using, and obviously if you don't open the mailing pack, then you're not going to find out what's inside it. Yeah? So what we did is we simply put a picture of the mailing pack on the survey, and then we recreated the audience that the mailing pack was going to go to. Now I forget what that was. It could have been people who had more than £250,000, say. So you can go to databases, get that data, and you can send a survey to it very, very cost effectively and get 1,000 responses back and ask them all sorts of questions. So this is an example. So we simply put the envelope on the survey, remove the headline. Now one of these here was on the front of that envelope, and it's removed. The single one's removed, and there were other ones that they were thinking about putting on there, but they didn't. Yeah. So, and we simply asked people which headline would motivate you to open the envelope. And this is the one they had run before, and 10% of respondents said that, and this was how the rest of it panned out. So this is the favourite, learn the secrets of successful property investment. That was then run, that was put on the front, and they got a massive uplift. Surprise, surprise. But testing that in the real world would be very expensive, because you'd have to get a high response back, and you don't get much response in the real world. You might get 2% of people responding. So to get a robust number of people responding from a mailing, you'd have to mail out 100,000 maybe. Yeah. So this is a very effective way of finding, and for each one you'd have to do a different headline for each segment. So you'd be mailing many, many, many thousands of people at huge cost before you find out what's working. So it's an example of where you can use quantitative online research very quickly and cost effectively to find out answers to very specific marketing problems. So, and one of the big points about research is fast. There are different types of research out there. There are sort of grand sector-based studies that are very strategic and take an awful long time, and people will pore over the course of the year, if you like. Positioning papers. There are also fast campaign-based research, which is about marketing communications, and increasingly this is becoming the norm. And with the internet, but when I first set up the panel back in Telegraph in 1998, it was paper-based. So we'd send out a printed survey, we'd wait a week, it would come back, we'd capture all the data and that. But now, of course, it's internet-based, very, very quick, very, very cheap. So to be able to engage so many people quickly and cost-effectively and objectively, and it's what you should be cautious about, though, is just sticking stuff out on the web, because the sorts of people who will just visit a branded website are often the most loyal. And one of the big dangers with research is that you ask the wrong people who are not representative of the audience you want to market to, and your conclusions are completely different. It's very important when you're doing this fast research that you recreate the audience that you're trying to target, and then you'll get reasonable answers. So this is an old quote, but it's still very valid. So, and it's really what I'm saying here is about, in the old days, it was an issue, the fact that research wasn't used as much, but now there's really no excuse. You shouldn't be making big marketing decisions without quantitative research, specifically panel-based research, which is basically where you go out to a representative audience and you will ask them a set of questions and then use that to communicate and make your decisions. Right.
Okay, thank you, David. So obviously you all got sent a survey a few weeks ago, and you were completing it to try and guess what you thought, how you thought consumers were going to react and respond to different areas. And here we've got the results to compare and contrast those. So the first question that was asked was, how often do you use social media, like Facebook, Twitter or Snapchat, for personal reasons on an average day? So this is how consumers responded. So 54% said they went on to them 1 to 5 times a day, 7% 6 to 10 times a day, 4% 11 to 20 times a day, 3% 21 to 40, 1% 41 plus times a day. What's interesting there is that 31% say they're not on any social media platforms. Obviously, when you get into marketing, marketers tend to really gravitate towards all the newest channels, all the latest technology, and get very excited about that. But what you've got to remember is there's always audiences that you're leaving behind that haven't done that. And that's really interesting that essentially 30% of the public don't use social media. So you need to make sure you target those in other ways. So we asked you how many people you thought visited social media between 6 to 10 times a day, and you estimated 64% of consumers would do that. So that's actually a really big gap there. You're overestimating the amount of time people will spend going on social media. Again, what you might do personally, or what you might do because you're more interested in technology, is not necessarily what Joe and Jackie Public will do. Okay, so the next question was, what makes you decide to open or read a direct mail pack? Please tick all the answers which you think apply. So we gave people a range of options. The most common reasons that people will open a piece of direct mail is because it's from a brand that they know, at 41%. 39% say they open it because they're interested in the product. 35% say it's because it's personally addressed to me. And that's very important, that aspect. That's something that continually gets overlooked. If your data quality is really poor and you don't have people's proper contact details or proper names on there, that reduces the chance of a direct mail piece being opened and engaged with. You then got containing a free sample, may contain a voucher, coming in about 1 in 4. At the other end of them, the other side of it, the things that don't really make people open an envelope is that the envelope is attractive, that it's got a nice design, or the colour of it. Those elements are least important. The most important elements are about, is it about the brand, the product, and is it actually addressed to me? So if we ask you, what percentage of consumers do you think will be influenced to open or read by the design? And again, there's a big gap there. So 54% as opposed to 6% in the real world. Again, there's a tendency that creative agencies focus on the design and all that aspects, but if you don't get the basics right, and don't mention the brand, don't talk about the product, don't get the data right, you're not going to get people engaging with your campaign. So, is there a minimum face value below which you are not motivated to save and redeem coupons? And people are asked to tick a column for each value. So what we've got here is that 57% of consumers would save and redeem a 20 pence off coupon, 76% would save and redeem 50 pence, 91% £1, and a staggering 96% say they'll keep a £5 off voucher. So you can see here that the coupons are very, very important to people. You're a bit more on the money with this one actually, so that gap's not quite as big, but you're still underestimating the importance of people wanting to save and redeem coupons. Essentially, any deal is a big deal for consumers. What's also interesting, this is something that when we've been doing this marketing gap survey over the last 10 years, this is something that marketers have continuously got wrong. They've always underestimated it. And again, that's because their lifestyles are so different to the consumers that they're talking to. And this is an interesting statistic that came up a few years ago, that the number of coupons redeemed by the UK has more than trebled since 2006, from 109 million to 365 million. In 2008, the financial crash happened. There was less money to go around. People had to save, and all of a sudden, coupons took on a different light. They weren't something just for the poorest people to do, it became something that savvy consumers would do as well. And the people motivated to save and redeem a 20 pence coupon has gone up year on year as well. So 2006, that's at 17%, 2010, 40%, and 2016, 57%. Again, this alludes back to David's point earlier. Data changes over time. What might have been the case 10, 15 years ago isn't necessarily the case now, and that's why you need to keep doing this research to see what the current trends are. This is particularly a problem in the marketing sector because there's so many books that are written by gurus 15 to 20 years ago, and they might have some very valid points in them, but also they're indicative of the world they were in at the time, and the world changes. Okay, so the fourth question that was asked was how likely would it be for you to switch brands if an alternative brand offered promotions or added value? So there are a range of options here. So the key ones is that 80% of consumers say they'd switch brands for a buy one, get one free promotion. And 76% say they'd change brands for something that had a lower price by more than 10%. What's interesting, again, something that the promotional marketing sector has focused on for quite a while, is that the free prize draw and the competition, those are less important areas, but I bet your bottom dollar, if you go into a shop today, you'll find there's plenty that are offering competitions and prize draws on there, but it's just not as incentivising as saving money. And again, you're closer here than you are on some of the other questions. You predicted that 2/3 of consumers will switch brands for buy one, get one free, but actually it's more like 4 in 5. Okay, next up. So when asked to tick a box, allow a company to market their goods and services to you, how often would you say that you agree? So essentially, how willing would you be to consent to receive marketing communications from the brands that you like? And what's quite interesting is people generally don't like to give their consent. There's only a certain number of brands that people can sign up to, otherwise we will end up with email inboxes that are completely full and we'll miss the other messages that are important to us. So only 65% of consumers will give their consent between 0 and 20% of the time. It's something that has to be earned and gained, it's not something that can be a given. So we asked you what percentage of consumers you think would give their consent to receive marketing. 40 to 60% of the time. You thought it was 35%. Actually, it's 12%, so that's a third of that. Okay, so another question was what motivates you to provide consent? Please tick all that apply. So the reasons that brands will give their consent to you, well, the leading ones are that 37% will find it rewarding, so they're going to get something out of it. 34% that you'll promise not to share their data with other brands and suppliers. 32% you're going to keep their data safe. Obviously there's lots of stories always in the press around hacking or losing details, so data safety is a really essential part. Trust of the brand as well is important at 31%. Offering exclusive extras, interesting contact, and no over contacts as well. People are concerned that once you give them your email address or your post or your phone number, you're going to get bombarded all the time with marketing. What's interesting is that feeling appreciated, which is something that the charity sector tends to do, often always says, thank you for your donation, thank you for that. It's a very, very unimportant thing. That doesn't mean you shouldn't include it at all, but it's not the most important thing you should be including in your consent messaging. What's interesting is actually on this one you've overestimated the importance of do not share data. So again, it's something that's important to mention, but there's other factors in play here as well. I also wanted to highlight a gap between consumers and marketers on promotion. So this is from the Marketing Gap study. One of the questions was, do people buy more as a result of promotional techniques like token collection? So obviously you might feel a bit bad that you haven't been able to guess consumers right, but don't worry, marketers are also in exactly the same boat as well. So the question was asked, so this was on the survey that ran 2 years ago, was in the last 12 months, have you bought more products than you planned because of extra long-term rewards from clubs or promotions such as these? So you have club cards or loyalty cards, which you get in supermarkets and for Costa. That's at 30, marketers predicted 37% of consumers would buy more as a result of that. Token collecting offers, like you get in McDonald's, 28%. Newspaper collectible offers, 27% of consumers think people buy more as a result of those offers. The truth is quite different to what marketers predict. Again, these are things that have worked for a number of years, but they're diminishing returns. And actually people don't tend to buy more or buy newspapers just because they got collectible or an offer with them. So actually 6% of consumers say they buy more as a result of that, as opposed to 27%, which was the marketer's prediction. Okay, David.
Thank you. Right, so going back to this idea of consent. Back up 20 odd years ago, I was at the Telegraph. I was running a database marketing division and collecting huge amounts of response data. And I would hide the opt-out box so readers would not see it. Yeah? And I'd get a very, very, very low amount of people who said I didn't want to be communicated through via the Telegraph. So that metric was tiny, 1 or 2%. So in essence, years back, you could talk to anyone you wanted. You could communicate to anyone you wanted. Then came the internet, and legislators have got involved. And as of January of this year, a new European-wide law has been put into place. It's called the GDPR. And it will come in place in May 2018. And what it basically, the core of it is that consumers have rights with their data and that marketeers need to respect those consumer rights. Now, obviously with the UK leaving the European Union, there is a bit of a question mark over what will happen with this law, but the bottom line is, and in fact it was one of the 170 questions that was asked by Labour to the government yesterday about Brexit. The fact is, well, two facts is, the first thing is there's going to be an overlap anyway of about 9 or 10 months because of this Article 50. So we will still be in the European Union when GDPR comes into force. And the second thing is, if we are to trade with any country outside of the UK, we have to have at least the same standards of data care that other countries have. So it's a bit of a red herring. The bottom line is that the level of care that you need to give data, consumer data, has risen exponentially. Now, there's a lot of discussion about this, and there's a huge amount of change going on inside companies. I say straight after this, we're going to Vodafone. We're doing a big project around consent and helping them to present their wording around privacy in an open and clear way. And we are leaders immodestly in this. Absolutely, we're leaders. We present at all sorts of conferences. Cambridge University, Westminster, all sorts of places around this, because we're tackling it in a very, very unique way. A lot of people out there are the legislators and the lawyers, and they're talking about a basic data structure. So how do you have to phrase it legally? Our view very much is that is the baseline. As marketeers, you need to present a compelling case for people to agree to receive marketing from you. So back 20 years ago at the Telegraph, the fact I was hiding the box, it didn't matter what was on it, frankly, no one ever read it. Now, it has to be open and obvious and clear. So consumers have a choice. They can tick or they can not tick. They can go either way. And for that reason, you have to be persuasive. You have to persuade them of the value of continuing to receive marketing from you. It's not just about a legal structure. So we call it the marketing of consent, a verb rather than a noun, or the marketing of marketing. So my view is that back in 20 years ago, well, 25 years ago, we sort of discovered databases, and we moved from being retailers, where we're just selling products, to database marketeers, when we're developing relationships with consumers. And we would invest in acquiring a consumer because we thought we'd make more or less money from them than another consumer. That was in the days where we could talk to anyone. Now I think the line has moved back further. And the first job of a marketeer is to get consent. Because if you haven't got consent, you can't talk to people. If you can't talk to people, you can't persuade them to consume your products. So that's the first challenge of a marketeer. So to sort of facilitate this discussion, we have created on our website, you're welcome to have a look, there's a calculator with a formula on there. Back in 85, 86, the concept of lifetime value was created by a guy called Professor Merlin Stone. And what this was, it was a measure of the profit that you would be likely to create from a new customer over the life of that customer as they engage with you. So say you're Next as a mail order company, and you acquire a new customer, and maybe they stay with you for 5 years, and each year you're making £10. So that customer will be worth £50 to you over the course of that time. That's their lifetime value. So this was quite an important concept because it helped us to direct marketing to different consumers based on their future profitability to that brand. Now what we have done here, given the line I think has moved back, we've tried to do the same with consent. And we call this the incremental preference value. So this is the value to a brand of increasing or decreasing the amount of individuals who will consent to receive your marketing. So if it goes up, you can talk to more people. If it goes down, you can talk to less. And so what we have, the problem with consent is that it has generally just been the territory of lawyers. So lawyers have locked their horns and said, right, this is the words we're going to use. When actually, if you phrase language in a compelling way, you can get a completely different answer with essentially the same structure. So what we've done is we've created this calculator. It's on our website. You can download the formula if you want to play around with it. You can put in numbers, and you can see how much value small changes in consent has to brands of reasonable size. It's a lot. There's a lot of noughts there. And the reason we do this is because we're trying to encourage brands to focus on the financial importance of that marginal change between 10% and 15% or 25% and 35% or whatever it is. It's huge. And then we sort of look at the two different types of marketing. So we've got normal marketing. We've got its commercial importance, strategically planned, lots of response analysis, loads of live testing. So you'll send out a direct mail ad, or you'll do an email, you'll set up some campaign, and of course you're changing it all the time. You're trying to see what works and what doesn't. Lots of creative and copywriting input, targeting different consumers, different donors with different messages, and the job's never finished. You never produce the perfect TV ad or the perfect website, the perfect direct mail pack. It always has to be changed as your products evolve and the environment changes. So that's what happens with normal marketing. Then we think about consent marketing, the marketing of consent. It's hugely commercially important and arguably more important than normal marketing. Because if you haven't got people to talk to, you haven't got any of this. Is it strategically planned? No. Is there response analysis? Well, we were doing some surveys about a year ago, and about over 60% of marketing managers were not even aware of the level of individuals who were consenting or not to their marketing. So that metric was hidden. Was there live testing? No, none of that. Creative and copywriting input? No, it's normally a lawyer. They just give you a load of copy, stick it on your marketing communication, and that's it. Targeting different messages? No, none of that. And refreshing and updating? No. So most brands, up till recently, have had the same statement: do you want to receive marketing from us, or whatever it's phrased, for years and years and years. So what we have done is we have basically researched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of every conceivable type of permission statement. We call opt-in, opt-out, every combination between, and all sorts of wording across all sorts of sectors, around thousands of respondents. We created a series of benchmarks. So for you today, behind this door is the perfect permission statement. It's going to work for everyone. Okay, so there's no such thing as a perfect permission statement. Everyone believes there is, and everyone sort of looks, to be honest, towards Fastmap, because you've researched so many permission statements, believing that there is one out there that's going to work for everyone. But there's not. There's a structure, but then that has to be wrapped around with compelling language for your brand. I'll give you one very good example. In the charity sector, we know that charities that begin with the word royal are perceived to be more technically competent than charities that don't. Now that's obviously completely unfair. And your average donor, your average charity consumer, is not immersed in the brand, doesn't talk to the technology department, but they have this perception in their head. So they're about to agree or not agree to marketing, and you've got a few words to communicate that and reassure them. If you begin with royal, you probably don't need to emphasise quite so much the fact you're technically competent. If you don't, maybe like Oxfam, who are probably bigger than nearly all the royal charities, you probably do. So that's just an example of how marketing is needed to persuade people. So going back to, Mark did a little bit on this. So we looked at how often people consent to marketing. So what you can see here, we've broken it down by age, and you can immediately see that people over the age of 55 give consent a lot less than older people. So we see here that 70% of those over the age of 55 give consent less than 20% of the time. Now that's really serious. Now if you, in the commercial world, there's a concept of share of wallet. And what that means is that there's a fixed amount of budget that an average consumer will have, say, to spend on a bike or bike maintenance over the course of a year. It might be £100, that's it. And all the bike shops in the area are essentially competing to get that £100 or part of that £100. That's called share of wallet. If you're not going to spend more than that, that's the fixed amount. It's the same principle with consent. So when people are given a choice, which they are now, individuals will not consent to receive everything. They're selective. So brands are in competition with other brands. In fact, your fiercest rival is your fiercest rival around consent. And so what has often happened in the past is that brands will look at what other people are doing with their consent statements and copy them. That was the time when people weren't reading them. Now they are. You have to articulate what's unique about your brand, and so you can be the one that's winning. It's part of your competitive advantage, how you articulate consent. One of the reasons for inertia, if you like, with consent, and we certainly find that about 75% of the people we work with haven't changed their statements in over 3 years. Now, in normal marketing, that would never happen. That would be bizarre. You'd never have a website or a TV ad that's just fixed. The problem is that if you test different versions of permission statements in a live environment, you're creating consumer contracts. So with a website, perhaps you try with one picture, another picture the next day. It really doesn't matter because you're just collecting data and it's response data. And you have no obligation based on the pictures that were included in the message. But if you're changing the wording around the agreement, how you're going to hold and manage and communicate to consumers, you're basically creating contracts. So that's the first problem. And the second problem is then you've got to store that data and hold it on your database and use it. And you're obliged to take account of that, of every single response next time. So for those two reasons, it's just impractical to learn in a live environment by iteratively changing permission statements. So we've come to the conclusion that small details really matter. Things like choice of words, tone of voice, order, length of copy, channel choice, opt-in, opt-out, all that sort of stuff. And we've come up with this structure for consent marketing. So the aim of it is to get people to consent. And the first thing is the desires, the positives, the reasons why people would agree to marketing. So exclusive extras, informative, appreciative, rewarding, and interesting. And in the past, this was never covered at all because people never read the statements. Now they've got a choice. They can agree or they don't agree. We've got the brand, and this is just a quick slide here to illustrate the fact that different brands have different, if you like, consent attributes. What we did is we emailed people via a survey and asked people, are you a current customer of any of these brands? And then we said, what do you think of their marketing? And broke it down by trust, rewarding, exclusive offers, do not share data, etc., and created an index. And what you can immediately see is the lines are all over the place for different brands. Yeah? That tells you that every brand is perceived as being different from the consumers. So if you are to make the most of that your marketing proposition, you need to articulate your particular brand as opposed to your neighbours. Next thing is the presentation of the consent statement. So is it understood, jargon-free, good layout, trustworthy, engaging? We've got the fears, which is sort of the territory historically of the lawyers, not shared, data secure, I'm in charge, flexibility and options, and no over contact. And finally, and this is arguably the most interesting area, when I first presented this at a direct marketing conference, the chair of the DMA, who was actually chairing that conference for us, he was presenting to Parliament 2 weeks later, and he used this concept, and it was a parliamentary select committee, to explain one of the complications around consent. So you never mistakenly buy a bike or buy a handbag. You do that willingly, you know that. But with consent, you will often give consent by mistake. And so to, if you like, recreate the concept of confusion in consent, we have created a process that allows us to break answers down to 3 areas. People who gave consent and intended to give consent, people who gave consent and didn't mean to give consent, bad consent, and the people who wanted to give consent but didn't. Now, if you think of how a permission statement appears on a website or on a mailing pack or on a coupon or whatever it is, there's a series of text, there's a series of boxes, and some are opt-in, some are opt-out, etc., etc. You're probably not giving most attention to that. You're skim reading and you're ticking or not ticking. Yeah? Now, based on that structure, we know there's a lot of confusion. And companies might fuss over the exact structure of it, but the reality is consumers give very little time and attention to it. And because of that, there's a lot of confusion. So we get this different type of data. So what affects it? Well, the structure, bundle, the length, the language, the design, the order. And if you think of how you read a list, you probably pay most attention to the first bit of the list and the last bit of the list, and probably skim read the middle bit. So that's all effects, and it may sound really anal and detailed, but the reality is that the big numbers are based on people agreeing or not agreeing to receive your marketing. So the structure of that list has a big impact. Okay, so then thinking about how you structure the wording and the channel options. Now, under the new legislation, you're required to get consent for each channel. You can't just say, can I market to you, and then hit them with any channel. You have to be quite explicit about that. Now, given that if you change the order that a statement is presented, you'll get different amounts of people consenting for different channels. What you need to, and this is an example of 5 statements with different levels of consent for each channel. You then start to think about, well, how do I objectively decide which is the best here? And so what we do is for clients, we help them to assign a relative weighting. And what we're saying here is, for each person agreeing to receive marketing through, say, phone, as opposed to email, it's either more or less important. So once we get those numbers, we can then apply the weighting against each of these percentage and get what we call a channel weighted consent score. Now this one here, if you skimmed along, this doesn't have the best level of consent in any channel at all, but because it does quite well in all of them, and including those weightings, this is actually the best statement. So it's that level of sort of granular thinking that we need to go down when setting the structure of these statements up. Then also thinking about the journey that the donors and supporters go on. So they might donate, and you can assign a value to them. If they agree to receive marketing from you, you can project it's likely you will generate a certain amount of revenue from them going forward. Perhaps then if they go for email, then next time they might go for mail. They've projected more value, a newsletter. They then maybe get a phone call and they're completely switched off. They don't want to receive marketing from you now, except for maybe by email, because they've had a bad experience. So again, this is different from the old days, but frankly, you just blast them with anything and you just keep on doing it. But now, people have the choice. So they say, I don't want to receive any of your marketing, you have to stop. So you have to be far more sensitive about what consumers want. So their value then would plummet, and perhaps then a gift is sent and they agree, all right, okay, all is forgiven and we'll continue to receive marketing. So that's an example of how a journey can progress with a consumer or a donor. Then in terms of how to test and create statements that are compelling, gosh, we're running quite short on time. Okay, so the 3 big areas are opt-in, opt-out, channel choice, and language. And so what we do is we basically recreate the audience that consumers are intending to market to, and we ask them to come up with a series of permission statements, and we measure them. And over each phase, they will iteratively improve, and hopefully at the end of that period, which is what we're doing straight after this, they will get some statements which are compelling and work for different audiences.
The second handout is going to be related to the final section, which is around direct response television, which is a particular type of advertising. Now, direct response television are TV adverts that actually ask you to phone this number or go to this website or text to do something. So you'll often see charities doing this in daytime, where they'll say, call this number to make a donation to the charity. Now, DRTV has many of the issues that any other marketing has, but it's so on a much larger scale because of the costs involved with it. So DRTV traditionally is very expensive to do. So we've got a table here which highlights some of the prices that people might have to pay to produce adverts and to learn whether it's the right advert to use. So you could be developing multiple different concepts for adverts. You might then be actually having to produce them, which can be very expensive. So it's not just about the production and the thinking, but then it's also about buying the media to actually test these adverts and see which one is going to be most effective at generating donations or getting people to buy from you. And then, if you then roll that out over a longer term, you could be talking about £250,000, £500,000 worth of income. And everything takes a long time to learn. Again, the merit of using online research is that you can fast track that process. You can get people to look at concepts for adverts, which sometimes these are referred to as storyboards, or if it's other creative, almost like that scamp, illustrations, concepts of the ideas. You discuss those with people and see whether they will engage with it or be likely to make a donation. By doing that online, you can be at a fraction of the price. You can then choose which of those concepts you'd like to take into full production, and then you can roll that out across multiple media. So a shorter term learning cycle, and also you don't understand what's working, but why it's working. This is the most important element of any research. It's not just knowing what works, but why it works, because you can then use that to help inform your future campaigns and activity. Traditionally, a lot of marketing has been referred to as push targeting. You give the advert, you send it out there, you get the reaction to it, but you don't know why people are responding in a particular way. So we're referring to this concept of a lot of charities who are looking at this area right now as effectively going inside the donor cocoon. You will often know people will be donating because you'll have people phoning you or making text donations. You might know that people are researching you because you might see a surge in website traffic, but you're not sure why people are doing that. And that can be for a variety of different reasons. So it could be that they're feeling an emotional connection with the advert. They feel affinity and they associate with the people that are featured in the advert. They clearly understand it, it interests them, and they would feel proud to support it as well. So as I said, traditionally you've got the ROI, your return on investment, and you might have your cost per acquisition, but you don't necessarily know why people are responding. So in the same way that we've come up with this consent benchmark research, we use the same principles to measure DRTV adverts to understand what people are doing. And again, the importance is about benchmarking your research. Without benchmarking your research, the numbers will not mean anything. It's really important to have that context. You could get 72% of people saying they trust a particular advert or they trust your brand, but without the context of what other brands are doing, you don't know whether that 72% might be the lowest score for trust ever, or it might be the highest score for trust ever. It's really important. By benchmarking, you can see how you're doing against your competitors, against other brands. And also, by taking this away and doing it online, you're not involving your donors or your customers, so it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's safer. You can take more risks. You can be bolder in your marketing without worrying if you're going to tread over the line and potentially shock people, upset them, or cause complaints. So, it's a bit of a similar looking chart here, but we researched several DRTV adverts across thousands of respondents, and well, we've got a cog here that looks a lot like the consent one. But these are the elements that will make people donate or buy after seeing a DRTV advert. So one part of that is about the actual content of the advert itself. So we're going to talk about this in charity terms here, but do they feel an emotional connection with the story? Do they feel it's original? Does it grab their attention? Is it interesting? Do they understand what it's saying? And most importantly, do they recall which brand it's for as well? This can happen quite a lot, both in charities and the commercial sector. You don't want people to watch your advert. You might be Cancer Research UK, and someone will pick up the phone and donate to Macmillan instead. It's important they remember who the advert is for. Then there's the actual ask. So what are you asking people to do? So typically for DRTV, this would be quite a low value amount, so something like £3 a month. So, is it original? Will people be proud to tell others about their donation? Is it compelling? Is it something that they would expect from that particular brand? Will they feel good from it, and do they understand it? Then there's the call to action. So this is actually the way you get people to react. So that would be picking up the phone, sending a text message, or going to the website. And what you have to remember, DRTV adverts tend to be about 60 to 90 seconds long. People don't often have pen, paper, phones to hand. I know a lot of people are now doing the second screen thing where they're watching it and they've got their phone in their hands. But people need to be able to record the contact details. Is it the way they want to respond? People don't like picking up the phone and making a donation. So is there another way of getting them to do that? Will they feel appreciated? Is it memorable? And also, a really important factor, is there an urgent need to react now? Or is it something that you might watch and you think, that's nice, I'll do something about it later? If you don't get that urgency across, you're likely never going to get the donation or the reason for people to buy straight away. We can then cut that by different profiles of respondents, and then there's the different types of action people might have. So some people might donate, respond now, they might research it, or they might discuss it. Okay, so a bit of fun here. We've got an advert for WaterAid, which I want you to all watch. Now you should all have a handout which basically has a series of attributes against it. So we've got action, so whether people share, discuss it, research, donate, ask, emotional, affinity and originality, advert, call to action and so on. And what I want you to do is tick against one of those columns whether you think people will be more likely than the average, in green, to respond in this particular way, or think the advert has that particular quality. Yellow, if you think it's average, on a par with other adverts, or red, where you think it might be below benchmark. So yeah, bit of interactivity for you at the end here.
This is an appeal to stop dirty water deaths. Sadly, you won't see it in the news, but today, dirty water will kill 1,400 children, more than malaria and AIDS combined. These children have no choice but to drink water from rivers, swamps, and stagnant ponds every day. Imagine your child drinking dirty water, knowing the next sip could kill. Right now, you can help save a child's life. Simply text TAP to 70123 to give WaterAid £3. WaterAid already has teams in place to install the pipes, pumps and taps that will bring clean water to children at risk. They just need your support. In the next minute, dirty water will kill another child. So please, don't wait to save a child's life. Text TAP to 70123 to give £3 now. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll give you about 20 seconds to do your ticks. Yeah.
Do you have any more notes?
One left. Do you not have any? Has anyone else got any spares, or have they all taken up? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the results now of how people actually responded and reacted to this advert. So what we can see here is it was very good at driving an immediate donation or response. So that was in green, so that was above benchmark, but it wasn't very good at driving people to research or share the advert with others. In terms of what people thought about the advert, people didn't really feel an affinity or connection with the cause. They didn't necessarily find it interesting, and they were seen as being below average in terms of grabbing their attention. In terms of the actual ask, it wasn't seen as being original or particularly compelling, but people could understand what they needed to do about it. And in terms of the call to action, people didn't like the fact that they had to text to make a donation, so that was below benchmark. But people were able to record the details because they were on screen for a long time, and there was also a clear urgent need as well. The important thing here is that what you might feel personally from watching an advert might not necessarily be what other people feel about watching an advert, and that's why it's important to involve consumers in that research. DRTV is becoming a growth area for charities, so more and more people are now having to look at this, test the adverts, even test adverts before they're filmed to see whether they will work and are the right concept. The difference between a good execution of an advert as well and a bad execution could be a difference between a £300 cost per acquisition and a £100 cost per acquisition. We've just done some work with a big charity who said that's the difference a good edit of an advert can make. And again, testing can help you find what works and what doesn't. So that's it for me.